shut off. There'll be no talking about employees in session.
All right, thank you.
You be seated. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Anything we need to take up?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring in the jury. Thank you. Welcome back, members of the jury. Everyone may be seated. All right, members of the jury, the defense will now present their closing argument. Mr. Dreicer?
May it please the court,
Yes.
counsel, members of the jury. Jared Bridegan was murdered. Henry Tenon murdered Jared Bridegan. Mario Fernandez had no motive. He had no desire. He had no reason, and he certainly gained no benefit from the death of Jared Bridegan. In the first 15 seconds of Mr. Hill's opening statement to all of you, that's exactly what he said. And it rings as true at the beginning of my closing statement to you all as it did when Mr. Hill told you that. Because what he told you was that the evidence that you had not seen yet would show that Jared Bridegan had been murdered, that Henry Tenon had murdered Jared Bridegan, and that there would be no reason for Mr. Fernandez to do this. And after you've seen all of the evidence in this case, and you've been presented even with the first closing argument, Mario Fernandez had no motive to do this. He had no reason to do it, and he got no benefit. So I'd like to walk you through what we expect the judge is going to read you, the law in this case. And then I'm going to walk you through all the facts we heard so we can determine whether or not the government met their burden, whether they told you just a series of half-truths every single day and didn't tell you the whole story until we would get up and ask the witness questions, get the whole story out, the whole picture. So let's walk through what I expect the law to be. The law is so important in this case because you have to take all of the information that you heard and with no doubt in your mind, in order to convict Mr. Fernandez, each and every one of the elements we're about to go over must be met. And I found it so important that we don't ever hide the law from you, that during my entire closing statement, the law will be right here, right behind me. So at any given moment, if you want to ask yourself, was there actually any evidence that Jared Bridegan is dead? Of course there is. That is not in dispute. There is no reasonable doubt that Jared Bridegan is dead. The death was caused by the criminal act of Mario Fernandez. There's all the reasonable doubt in the world that this criminal act wasn't caused by Mr. Fernandez. The state has told you that Mr. Fernandez did not do any act that caused Jared Bridegan to die. And there was a premeditated killing of Jared Bridegan. While we're walking through, you have to determine whether there was a premeditated killing that Mr. Fernandez, prior to the murder, wanted Jared Bridegan dead. So we know that Mario Fernandez did not kill Jared Bridegan. That is not in dispute. So then the state attorney relies on what is a principal instruction. And the principal instruction says, if Mario Fernandez helped Henry Tenon commit a crime, then he's a principal, and he must be treated as if he had done it. So I'll concede that they're going only on the principal instruction because clearly Mr. Fernandez did not kill Jared Bridegan. So how do they do that? What do they have to prove to you with no doubt? What must you be convinced of at the highest level of our justice system that you will leave this courtroom with no doubt in your mind, that you are convinced beyond all doubt? You have to know that Mario Fernandez intended for this crime to occur. So when we're walking through the facts this afternoon, ask yourselves, what single fact before February 16th of 2022 did you hear one witness say that Mario Fernandez wanted this crime to occur? What witness took the witness stand and said, or heard, or a wire call, anything, any piece of evidence where you heard Mr. Fernandez say, I want that son of a bitch dead. I'll do anything to kill Jared Bridegan. I hate him. He deserves to die. Any number of disgusting, foul statements that we always hear in murder cases. Ask yourselves, what one singular statement did you hear so that you could know beyond all doubt that Mr. Fernandez intended this crime to occur prior to February 16th?
Your Honor, I'm objecting to misstatement of the law for the third time.
You want to be heard?
No, I'll reread the instruction, Your Honor.
So I'll sustain the objection.
The defendant intended the crime to occur. And then second, the defendant did not act, did some act, or said something that was intended to, and that did incite, cause, encourage, assist, advise the other person to actually commit the crime. That's what the judge is going to read you. That's what you have to know beyond all reasonable doubt. And while we're walking through this, please ask yourselves over and over again, what fact did we hear that Mr. Fernandez did some act that encouraged or caused or assisted this crime to occur? That you heard on a wire call, that you heard a witness say that he did, that he incited, that he did any of these things. And then the second charge is criminal solicitation. And in the criminal solicitation count, the government has alleged that on between November 1st and February 16th of 2022, right off the rip, what evidence did you hear in this case about anything that happened in November of 2021? What one piece of evidence did you hear of anything that happened in November? And I'm going to submit to you there was none. What one piece of evidence did you hear in this case that anything happened in December of 2021? Why has the government alleged that there's some period of solicitation when they didn't show you one single piece of evidence for 2 months? And then I'll concede the first piece of evidence that they showed you during this time period is somewhere around January 5th, and we'll talk about that. But you have to ask yourself while we're walking through these facts, and most importantly, while you're deliberating, what one piece of evidence did you hear? Go back, please. That Mario Fernandez solicited Henry Tenon to commit this offense. What call? What text? What meeting? What witness? What did you ever hear that Mario Fernandez solicited Henry Tenon to do anything? I'm going to submit to you, you didn't. It did not happen. There was no evidence. And when they say the checks are post the homicide. Checks, there is no check. And I very carefully went through, and we'll talk more about the checks, but just to give you some...
Mr. Dreicer, pause for a moment.
Flash for a second. Take your time now. It's all the way down. The floor. It's just a loose connection.
There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go.
I won't touch it. I'll touch it. No, leave it. I gotta be able to see it. Thank you.
May proceed.
Thank you. So first, they have to prove to you that Mario Fernandez solicited him in some way. Before the homicide, he went to him and said, hey, I want you to commit this particular crime. And there is no evidence whatsoever of a conversation, a solicit, a meeting where a solicitation took place. None. And then, on top of that, they have to prove to you, convince you, so that there is no doubt in your mind that during that meeting, that solicitation, that time period, that event that they've never been able to prove to you happened, that Mario Fernandez commanded, encouraged, or hired, or requested Henry Tenon to engage in this specific conduct, which would constitute first-degree murder. They first have to prove to you that there's some meeting that took place that you've seen no evidence of. And then they have to tell you exactly what happened at that meeting or during that call.
Objection, Your Honor. It's a misstatement of the law.
This is my argument as to the
Hold
element.
on. Let me see you at sidebar really quick. I overrule the state's objection. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. The law that's been in front of you this entire time says is that they have to prove so that there is no doubt in your mind that Mr. Fernandez solicited Mr. Tenon to commit this crime, and then the specifics of what happened during that solicitation. They have to prove to you that Mr. Fernandez in some way commanded, encouraged, hired, requested to engage in this specific conduct. And that's what the law is. It will be behind me the entire time I give my closing argument, and I ask you to think to yourselves, what evidence did I hear at all that I could know without any doubt in my mind that these crimes were committed and that every element has been satisfied by the government? There is no question that the facts of this case are sad. There is no question that there was a child in the car. There is no question that an innocent man was gunned down in a dark street on a night in which he least expected it. We concede that fact. We don't dispute that fact. And what the judge is going to read to you is that although those things may be true, and we're not asking you to ignore them, when you go back to deliberate, you can only decide this case upon the evidence that you have heard, the testimony of the witnesses, and that you've seen in the form of exhibits and testimony and evidence. But this case must not be decided for or against anyone because you feel sorry for anyone or are angry at anyone. And your verdict should not be influenced by feelings of prejudice, bias, or sympathy. Your verdict must be based on evidence and the law contained in those instructions. So although we concede how sad this case is, the judge is going to instruct you that you cannot take those feelings and use them in any way to be biased or prejudiced against Mr. Fernandez or the evidence that is or is not applicable to him. So real briefly, we started this case with this family law motive that Shanna and the history of their family law case. So very briefly, Shanna and Jared Bridegan got married in 2010. That's the history. 2 twins were born of this marriage, AB and LB, in 2012, and Shanna filed for a petition to dissolve her marriage with Jared in 2015. the court entered a consent final judgment ordering equal time sharing. And although that doesn't seem like an important fact of this case, it may be the most important fact, because as the state has told you, the motive for Mr. Fernandez to commit this murder is because they weren't happy with the child custody arrangement. But the fact is, the evidence in this case is nothing consistent with that fact. Because when Shanna and Mario get married, that's in 2018. So all of what we just went over before, Mr. Fernandez didn't even know about. It wasn't facts that he was aware of. But he does get married, and over the years, there are modifications and changes. And we went through those together, and every single one of them is in this binder. The entire docket sheet is in the binder, and all the applicable pleadings that we talked about and the state was free to put into evidence, any that they talked about. Not one time does Shanna Gardner or Mario Fernandez attempt in any way to change the custody agreement between Shanna Gardner and Jared Bridegan. They're right. They did argue once over who should pay for an oxygen machine. Ms. Stifler said they litigated that issue. No, they did not. I showed you that pleading, and then I quickly showed you that they came to an agreement, meaning they asked the court for litigation, and then the two parties on their own decided who to pay for it, and they agreed. No question that not one single time did Ms. Gardner ever say, I think it would be better to take away time sharing from Jared Bridegan. Never. Not one time. And in fact, I showed you that in the pleadings in which they did talk about time sharing, she repeatedly asked the court to keep a 50-50 time sharing. And in one pleading I showed you, she went out of her way to say, it's working really well. We just want to switch the days. So when you hear the rhetoric that this is about a child custody battle, what you should be hearing is that when Ms. Gardner or Jared Bridegan had any issues that they wanted changed, they went to court. They filed pleadings. And they either agreed on their own, which is what happened in every single situation, or their intended purpose was to ask the court to rule. You didn't hear one time that there was any self-help where Mario Fernandez threatened Jared Bridegan, said, if you don't agree to this, I'm going to do this to you. And in fact, this family law case had been closed for over 4 months. Completely closed, with no filings prior to the homicide of Jared Bridegan. There wasn't a single family law dispute going on at the time of the homicide. I thought it would be helpful when we go through all the witnesses. I would show a picture so it would help us do a visualization of who we're talking about and what they said. First witness, if you may recall, was Miss Cruz. She was a scene witness. She got there. She placed a 911 call. It's obvious she didn't know what had happened. She took great care of BB. She did not see anyone leaving, and we asked her no questions. Because as we promised you in the beginning, if we didn't think it aided you in determining the law with the facts of this case, we did not want to waste your time. Then Mr. Borgia took the stand. He was also a scene witness. He didn't see anyone leaving, and we didn't ask him any questions. The next witness was Sergeant Smith. He was a responding officer, and what I noted from his testimony is he just said how dark that road was and how dark that road was. And you have to ask yourself, why was it so important that they kept talking about how dark that road was? It's because the government cannot prove to you who the people who were involved in this crime were. They don't know who was driving that truck. So they want it to be known how dark it was. But then when I got up, I said, it's not dark all over Jack's Beach, is it? And he's like, no, there's street lights all over Jack's Beach. Isn't that correct? Yeah. There's surveillance at the police station. You can see just fine. That's correct. Because there's plenty of light in Jack's Beach to determine, if they could, who was involved in this crime. And what the evidence in this case is, it's not Mario Fernandez. It's Henry Tenon and an unknown person who was driving that truck. We'll talk more about that. Then you heard from Ms. Bridegan. Ms. Bridegan told you that there were thousands of text messages in a group family chat, meaning that they communicated regularly. Shanna Gardner, Kirsten Bridegan, Mario Fernandez, and Jared Bridegan. Not one single threat of violence. She couldn't articulate one time where there was an act of violence, that Mr. Fernandez did something that made her nervous or made her afraid or said something threatening, like, if you don't drop the kids off at this time. Because I asked her, what were they mostly scheduling? And she said, yeah. Medical appointment stuff? Yeah. In thousands, there wasn't one time where this alleged murderer just kept his cool all the time. He never one time made a threat. One time did an act of violence that she could articulate. No physical confrontations between Mr. Fernandez and Jared Bridegan. I said, did he ever report to you that he threatened him or confronted him? No. She showed that the family law case was closed 4 months before. There was no arguments about this upcoming baptism. She said Mr. Fernandez and Ms. Gardner were calm about it. Ms. Gardner took AB dress shopping. And this is an important fact. I said, did you go over to the Fernandez residence the day after this homicide? She's like, I did. I asked if I could go over there so we could all deliver the news to the children together. And I said, did they agree? And she said, yes, they did. They invited Miss Bridegan into their home at her request, meaning she wasn't afraid of Shanna Gardner. She wasn't afraid of Mario Fernandez. She asked, can I come into your home? Can we do this together? And they said yes. They included her in that. But what you later learned in the interview of Mr. Fernandez, where I'll admit he is a little angry. He is a little uncomfortable about what happened, because with the grace that they showed Miss Bridegan, she did not in return. She would not allow Miss Gardner to attend the funeral of Jared Bridegan with her daughter. And there is no question that after the grace Mr. Fernandez and Miss Gardner showed Miss Bridegan, she did not return that grace, and he was frustrated about that. And then they made a big deal that there was a suggestion of death filed in this case. Per the rules of Florida court, when there's a child in the family law system and there are pleadings regarding those child, you file what's called a suggestion of death, letting the court know that one of the parties had passed. That is all it means. It doesn't mean anything else. You heard from Dr. Gillespie. He was the medical examiner in this case. He confirmed what we've all been talking about, that in fact Jared Bridegan was murdered, and we asked him no questions. Then you heard from Detective Jarman. He was an evidence technician who went to the scene. He talked about what the scene looked like, what he had did. He had done a walkthrough. He said a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that's why it was important for him to videotape in case it had any evidentiary value. And he participated in carefully collecting DNA from the scene. Next, we heard from Corporal Wallace. This is the witness who compiled all of the surveillance in this case. He headed up the task force of people that went from business to business, from residence to residence, to collect every piece of possible surveillance that they could find in this case so that they could attempt to connect Mario Fernandez to the homicide of Jared Bridegan. And he told you just how carefully he had done that. And they had, on direct examination, they had asked him, well, what do you convert times to make sure everything lines up? Yes, I took great care to do that. I added up times. I subtracted UTC to format it so everyone could get a good idea what's happening. And of course, the video was wrong. First question I asked him, Sir, you said that you took great care and precision to do this. You think precision is important? Yes, I do. You think accuracy is important? Yes, I do. You agree with me that this video is incorrect? Yes, it's wrong. Well, what's wrong? Is it not the truck that's pulling out, or is it the time? It's the time. On the video, if you recall, before I got up on cross-examination, it looked like the truck pulls out, and then they show a map, and then they showed it on a fairway. But it wasn't until we got up. There's 36 minutes that we had to tell you, you have no idea where that blue truck is prior to the homicide. When that truck pulls out of Pablo Hamlet for 36 minutes, you don't know where it is. And then I went out of my way to say, okay, well, the state's alleging that there's no surveillance at a gravel parking lot. Were there any reports that a vehicle was in that gravel parking lot? No, sir. You had mentioned that there's a long street along the golf course where there's no surveillance. You had mentioned that that's a busy road at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night on a Wednesday night. That's 15th. That's right. Did you get one report, one Crime Stopper tip, any information that a Ford F-150 that's been blasted on the internet and the news was just randomly parked along that way? No, no information. So this whole time, the government gets up here and they're like, Mr. Fernandez didn't report the F-150. Mr. Fernandez didn't report the F-150. Nobody reported the F-150. Jimmy Jones, where the truck was found, didn't report an F-150. It's because there are thousands of F-150s and the surveillance really wasn't all that clear that was released to the media. But there is no evidence that in this case, a truck, an F-150, two-toned in color, on the night of the homicide was anywhere near the Fernandez residence, anywhere parked on the roadway, and certainly not at the Cradle Creek Preserve. They just throw these things out there, and they expect you to say, well, it could have been. Now, it's interesting. When they want to do could have beens, they say you can't do that. The jury instruction is going to tell you it's not a forced doubt, it's not a speculative doubt, it's not an imaginary doubt, until they want you to fill in the gaps of the evidence and say there's a blue truck parked at a gravel parking lot. No evidence of that whatsoever. They just want you to believe that without ever giving you a single piece of evidence that that's true. Today, in the beginning of Ms. Stifler's opening statement, she said, you can believe that, and you can believe that. She was like Oprah Winfrey handing out vehicles. You get a car, you get a car. It's not how it works. It's not you get to believe this, you get to believe that. We have evidence. That's what all of this is. They spent 6 days trying to establish that Mr. Fernandez participated in this crime, and that's what you have to know. You have to know, or at least be presented with something so that you could believe that during that 36-minute period of time, Mr. Fernandez had something to do with this crime. But the answer is they just don't know. They have no idea where that truck was. They have no idea who was in that truck. And they just want you to guess or fill in the gaps in your mind. Ms. Stifler told you very on in her opening statement this morning, you can use reasonable inferences. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to read a lot of law to you, and when I'm done and Mr. Mizrahi's done, the judge is going to read you a bunch of jury instructions. You listen. See if you ever hear the word, you can take and use reasonable inferences. See if you ever hear that this afternoon, because I submit to you, you will not. You will never hear the judge say, yeah, you can just do reasonable inferences and jump from fact to fact. That is not something that you're going to hear. That's just something that they told you because they want you to do that, because they didn't meet their burden in this case. The next, and I wasn't trying to be a stickler about all the little mistakes in this case, but my client is charged with first-degree murder, which is the highest crime that you can be charged with in this country. So when they make all the mistakes about the times that we have to point out, and it's in evidence, and when you look at the CD, it says, State of Florida, State v. Shanna Gardner, Hernandez. They don't even get his name right. And is that the biggest deal in the world? No, but it's one mistake after the next mistake that we have to keep pointing out to you because the government was careless. They're not taking the time to make sure that in this case, all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and that they have their evidence in order. It's just one mistake after the next. And then it shows, after we corrected it, that it's 8 o'clock when the truck pulls off. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Pablo Hamlet is on surveillance. It runs all the time. And they want you to believe that that's the area of interest. But yet, you never see Mr. Fernandez at Pablo Hamlet. You never see a person running from his residence to the Ford F-150, from the Ford F-150 back to the residence. No evidence of that. So what does the government do when they have absolutely no evidence that Mr. Fernandez ever gets to that truck or ever gets back to his home or goes back from his home back to the truck? I mean, let's just talk about it. What they're telling you is, and we'll get to his phone, trust me, but his phone goes off, then his phone goes back on, then she wants you to believe that there's a second gap, his phone goes off, his phone goes back on. He's home. But if you want to believe what the government's trying to convince you to believe, he has to be running all around Jax Beach. Detective Johns told you that when the phones finally connect, one phone pings over by Mojo's. The other phone is over by the police station where Henry Tenon is. They want you to believe it's Mario Fernandez who's over there by Mojo's, and somehow, like a ghost in the night, he never is seen. So think about what they keep asking you to do. In that video, when the truck pulls off, all of a sudden Detective Johns is like, it pulled into a gravel lot. I said, you can't even see in that video the vehicle stop. And he's like, no, you can't. So what makes you think it stopped? He just told you. I think it stopped, even though I asked him right on the stand, you acknowledge that you can't see that video stop. That's correct. You have any evidence that it ever stopped there? No. He just wants you to believe it because that's something you'd have to imagine because he wants it to be true because it's nowhere else. Go back. I asked them what no criminal defense attorney ever does. You ask questions you know the answers to. And I looked at him and I said, tell me, after that truck pulls off, you believe it doesn't leave for hours. Where does the truck go? What did he tell you? I don't know. I think it pulled into a lot. There is no evidence of Mr. Fernandez out and about, the blue truck, for approximately 3 hours after you last see that truck pull out of Pablo Hamlet when it just backs up, turns around, and pulls forward. So like we said, there's no surveillance. I showed a video, if you recall, of the truck passing a sidewalk by the police station. And I said, count how many people are on the sidewalk. And it was 7. 7 people in that one clip were right next to that truck. And not a single person reports seeing Mr. Fernandez, a person who's been blasted all over the news and the media, saying, I saw him that night. He was in that truck. Not a single person. This is 7 o'clock at Jax Beach. This isn't a time period where it's in the middle of the night and no one would see him. And then I showed you all what area they had pulled into. Mr. Fernandez is going to be running from his home, cross Discovery School, back to a truck at the area of interest, and it's not caught on surveillance. It's not seen. He's not seen by any one of the people in the 40 or 50 windows that are in just that building, in the smokers pavilion. Do you remember when I asked the detective about Corporal Wallace about that smoking pavilion? And I said, it was 7 o'clock at night. Not a single person in an area where people congregate and smoke, which is, 30 feet from where the car was parked? And he said, oh, I don't think people smoke at night. Have you ever met a smoker? Do they stop smoking at 6 o'clock? That's what they're trying to do. When they cannot give you evidence or an answer in this case, They just say whatever they want, including smokers stop smoking at around 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night. And you have to ask yourself, how credible is that if someone's willing to tell me something we know just isn't true? Am I to rely on this kind of evidence to convict Mr. Fernandez of first-degree murder? That's for you to decide. And then he collected so much, if you go back, so much surveillance that they caught, in this video it's really small, but it's all there, back there in evidence, and every witness agreed. When Mrs. Bridegan pulls into the police station, you can see Henry Tenon in the same frame of Mrs. Bridegan pulling into the police station. If you stop it, you can see Henry Tenon on the sidewalk, and you can see Miss Bridegan's vehicle. And I'm not suggesting to you that that's some fact that you should believe that Miss Bridegan is involved. I'm not. But ask yourselves this. If they had Henry Tenon and Mario Fernandez in the same frame on the night of the homicide, how many times would they play that for you? They would say that is all the evidence that you need. And they collected so much surveillance that they actually got the killer and the widow in the same frame on the night of the homicide, and they can't show you one piece of evidence that connects Mario Fernandez on the night of the homicide to the crime scene, to the truck, to the route, to a gravel lot, to the Cradle Creek Preserve. Nothing, except for that Mario Fernandez is at his house. That's how much surveillance the government collected in this case. And then they want you just to believe it's just chance luck that he's a ghost in the night. And that's not reasonable. Then we heard from Detective Burrell. He said that he collected the tire at the Potomac house. He told you that who was there when he collected it, and that he went to the home, knocked on the door, and who was at the house when he got there? Mario Fernandez and Miss Gardner. So when they say, we have no idea where Mr. Fernandez was the night of the homicide, yes, you do. You know exactly where he was. They have him traveling at 5:45, and we'll get there on Beach Boulevard, going back to his house. He never leaves. His phone never leaves. And when law enforcement, who they told you, they don't call and say, hey, we're on our way over. They don't know when they're going to pop in. When they popped in, who was there? Mr. Fernandez. So when you hear over and over again, we don't know. They told you in the opening statement, we don't know where Mr. Fernandez is. They told you in the first close, we don't know where he is. You do know. He's at home because witnesses saw him at home. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but while we're talking about it, Mr. Fernandez's interview said that he was home. And then you say, well, maybe he would lie. How do we know he's not lying? We know he's not lying because he said, when the children came in, I talked with them. And they told me that Jared Bridegan took a 20-minute or so phone call during the date night. And then I asked Detective Johns, did you confirm whether that was true? And he said, yeah, he had to take a work call during the date night. How in the world could Mr. Fernandez know that there was a call during date night unless the daughter told him when he got home that there was a call during date night? So now you know he's home because he said he was home. The facts confirm that he was home. His phone is at the location, and Detective Burrell, sure enough, knocks on the door, and Mario Fernandez is there. He's not acting nervous. He's not sweating. He's not doing anything evasive. He's not fumbling with his phone. Not one single detail could they offer you that suggested their favorite phrase, that Mr. Fernandez had consciousness of guilt. None. He answered the door, he spoke with detectives, and there was nothing unusual whatsoever about the encounter. And they looked at the evidentiary ring doorbell, they shared it with him, and he said he just didn't see anything of evidentiary value. Then we got to meet Detective Chris Johns. There is going to be a jury instruction that the judge is going to read you that I want to point out now. because this is the point in the trial where you have to ask yourself, was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? That's your job to determine that. But I suggest to you that when the government had a question for Detective Johns, he had no problem answering it. Can you tell me about these FBI cast slides? Sure, I'd be glad to. Then I ask him, can you tell me just, some basic information? Oh, we should leave that for Agent Blythe. If they wanted it, he had no problem answering their questions. If I just wanted a simple answer to a simple question, he just wouldn't give it to me. I had to walk through 30 minutes of a bank account, an irrevocable trust yesterday that had no $50,000 transfer out of it. Didn't occur. He could have just said, there's no $50,000 transfer. But he wouldn't. He was not straightforward in answering my questions. And that is one of the factors in weighing the evidence in this case that I will ask you to consider when you go back and deliberate. He has no homicide experience. This was his first case. He's now a part-time employee. He works as a financial planner or a tax person. He acknowledges this was the biggest case of his career, and he had no experience handling a case like this. He acknowledged that there were thousands of Crime Stopper tips. He said sometimes people would just call and be like, I saw a Ford F-150 at the Home Depot, and there's nothing we could do with it. But that's how many tips they got. People in the area were willing to give any information they had, and yet not a single shred of evidence on the night of the homicide that anyone came into this courtroom and reported connecting Mr. Fernandez to the blue truck, to the scene, to the route, to the school, to the gravel parking lot, or any other place they want you to imagine Mr. Fernandez may have been at. January 5th. This is the first date that I sort of had to go through because the government suggests this date has some importance. And remember, in the opening and this morning, Ms. Stifler will say to you, these are just snapshots in time. These are just snapshots of evidence. It's that way because the government made it that way. They're just showing you snapshots and then asking you to string together why our client is guilty. We are the ones that tried to show you the whole story. We're the ones who tried to show you poll camera footage from other days. We're the ones who tried to show you reasons why he would be doing X or Y or Z at other times. They want to show you certain dates that have certain reasons and certain values for whatever their prerogative is. So let's start at January 5th. Mr. Tenon, or his device, goes to the area of the Fernandez residence and Pablo Hamlet. Government told you that there would be no reason for him to do that other than his landlord lives there. And then they said, well, there was a phone call on January 4th. So if there's a phone call on January 4th, that means that this had something to do with the homicide. Or did it have to do with Mr. Fernandez calling and saying, dude, you haven't paid me in 3 months. Like, I'm meeting up with you, I'm getting my rent payment, or you're out of here. Government will get up and Mr. Mizrahi will say, there is no evidence of that. There's not. There's also no evidence that he went there for any nefarious purpose. There is evidence that he didn't go to the crime scene. So they want you to believe this was some practicing for the ambush. I don't know why Mr. Tenon was there, but he didn't see Mr. Fernandez. There's no cellular data suggesting Mr. Fernandez was home. There's no GPS showing that Mr. Fernandez was there. There's no evidence connecting Mr. Fernandez to January 5th whatsoever. And suspiciously, when Agent Blythe shows the GPS of January 5th, there's no confidence levels. It's the one slide, they're just all blank. But it's the one slide, he's like, I think that Mr. Tenon was on their street. Their street is 300 feet long. And yet that day, he's like, I think he went on a street. And I was like, okay, if you're right, and he did go on their street, was he on there for more than 30 seconds? No. That's what you learned on January 5th, is that some tenant of Mr. Fernandez went to the area after knowing that he's owed him money, he's behind on his rent, and may have been on his street for 30 seconds. No evidence of where Mr. Fernandez is, no evidence of their communications on that day. And then Ms. Stifler says, we have communications on the 4th, we have none on the 5th, blame Mr. Fernandez. This is their investigation. This is their burden. They have to come up with communications. They have to come up with the evidence. They have subpoena power, they have warrant power, and they did it over and over again, but when they don't have evidence, they look to blame Mr. Fernandez. Then the next date is January 25th. Mr. Fernandez goes to John Biggerstaff's house. And they're like, well, it's only one reason could be to talk about a 10mm firearm. He has known this man for 17, 18 years. They work out together. They have a cigarette every once in a while. They have a beer together. Mr. Fernandez helped with his son's upcoming wedding. Let's ignore that legitimate reason. They have known each other. They do things together. They do tile work together. They have done handyman work together, or at least Mr. Fernandez has hired Mr. Biggerstaff to do it when he was healthy and he owned a company, 904 Handyman. One reason after the next, we were able to show you why he may have been over to that house. Has to be a 10mm. That's what the government has to tell you. And of course, not to jump the gun, but we know why he went there one day, because it's on video. But when it's on video, they tell you, can't be for that reason. So whenever you show them the real reason, they tell you you shouldn't believe that, and you should make up something in your mind that's nefarious or criminal, when they cannot show you that they have any connection to nefarious or criminal activity between Mr. Fernandez and Mr. Biggerstaff. January 29th. On January 29th, Mr. Fernandez goes to the Potomac address. There's no dispute with that. Now, in this case, Agent Blythe will tell you that I don't track people, I track devices. And studies show that people are within arm's reach of their device. Sometimes they corrected me, because I would say Mr. Tenon went to this place, or Mr. Tenon went to that place, or Mr. Fernandez was at this place or that place. And he would say, I don't know. I just know his device. But on the 29th, all of a sudden now, they throw out the studies, they throw out their own testimony, and they say, because he went there on a day that Mr. Tenon was doing something that obviously had something to do with the homicide. I don't dispute that. When we said it was a dry run and we're the ones who told you that. We were the first people to give you that information in this trial, to show you those slides. No dispute. But the detail is, number one, in a vacuum or a silo, looking at it independently, that would be a really bad fact if there was no evidence that Mr. Fernandez ever went to Potomac. That's not the case. So I painstakingly, and I acknowledge it was boring, and it was slow, and it was painful. I showed you the poll camera footage that showed you how often Mr. Fernandez would go to that location, because it's not in a silo, and it's not in a vacuum, and it's not one day like January 29th. He was there regularly. So I showed him, and we didn't put up the poll camera. They did. There was no camera on January 29th. But if there was, it would show you exactly what I was able to show you, is that Mr. Fernandez goes there, he drops things off, he does work, he meets vendors. We showed the Bueller air conditioning guy show up. They've shown you that he bought a new air conditioner. Today, for the first time, they're making this big argument that who would get a contract for a 1-year service agreement when you know, or you end up selling the home. The contract and the service agreement is in evidence. And if you decide to look at the evidence list and look it up, another half-truth that they didn't share with you is when he paid $15,000 for his air conditioning unit, and you look at the service contract, it says 1 year maintenance included. But somehow, in the state's first close, that was some big point. Who pays for a 1-year service contract when you later sell the home? It came with it. That's what the continued theme of what they keep doing. They just tell you one little piece of evidence, and then when you look at the whole truth of the whole story, it doesn't add up. It's not what they're telling you. They didn't tell you that he goes there regularly. I mean, think about where they're tracking Mr. Fernandez in this case. They're either tracking him at the place he lives in Jack's Beach or a place he owns. They don't ever show you any information or evidence that he went somewhere where Mr. Fernandez shouldn't have been. They don't show you evidence that he met up in some murky pool hall on a part of town that he doesn't go to meet up with some character that he doesn't know. That does not exist in this case. He goes to a place that he owns, and he goes to a place that he lives. Those are the two places they have tracked Mr. Fernandez in this case, and that is it. They keep telling you, even as much as this morning, Ms. Stifler's like, and his phone was stationary. I don't know why they keep saying that. I asked Detective Johns and Agent Blythe, when a phone is in a band, in the pink bands, can you tell where the phone is? No. The technology isn't that good. If he's sweeping, I don't know if you guys remember, I was standing right here, and I said, if he's sweeping in his driveway, can you tell if the phone's moving? No, we can't tell. We just know that it's in the band. If he's moving boxes, if he's tiling, can you tell? But for whatever reason, they repeatedly just keep telling you that that phone was stationary at Potomac on the 29th because they want you to believe it so badly because there's no evidence that that phone left Potomac while Henry Tenon was doing whatever Henry Tenon was doing. And then, yes, I agree. A person could leave their phone at the Potomac place and leave it on and go with Henry Tenon. Is that possible? Sure. But you have to have evidence of that. And she's like, there's no way to get surveillance in retrospect a year later in St. Johns County. I don't know if that's true or not. You didn't hear any evidence that that's true. They didn't get any, so they want you to believe that. But there could be financial transactions. There can be people reporting, I saw a black man in an F-150 with a person that matches the description of Henry Tenon. There is no evidence. There's license plate readers that show the truck was there. They have the ability to match two pieces of evidence to a location. I went through that. They just don't have anything that lets Mr. Fernandez's device or himself leave that property, so they use words like it was stationary the whole time when you were told that's not possible to tell. And then ask yourselves that he's some big mastermind who turned off his phone on the night of the homicide because that somehow would protect him. He doesn't turn off his phone this particular time. What is it? Does he think that turning off your phone is helpful or leaving your phone on is not? It doesn't make any sense. They don't have a consistent theory. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. On February 15th, Mr. Fernandez goes to the Potomac address. He goes twice, and they wanted to make a big deal out of that. Number one, the first time he goes on the 15th, Henry Tenon's not there. If you recall, he's at Modison Pallets, the place that he works, and he's not even there. Well, that's unusual. The day before the homicide, why would Mr. Fernandez go to the residence that he owns, where Henry Tenon is staying with his best friend, Jeremy Ordway? We'll talk about that in a second. Why would he go there twice on that day? So I painstakingly showed you evidence that it is not uncommon for Mr. Fernandez to go twice to the residence when he's doing work. I was able to show you on 8-9 that he pulls in the morning at 7:46. He stays there for a period of time. And then on 8-9 at 2:05, several hours later, Mr. Fernandez comes back. This is showing you that it has nothing to do with the fact that it's the day before the homicide. It has nothing to do with that it's suspicious that Mr. Fernandez went there twice in one day. That's what Mr. Fernandez would do if it required him to do that for whatever reason he was doing it. And then they suggest to you today, well, there's just no reason he would ever go there. Look at the state of disrepair. He wasn't really doing any work there. That's not the evidence. The evidence on a poll camera that you saw that he didn't know was put up is that he pulls in, there's supplies get unloaded, they get taken in. You see Mr. Fernandez with this orange bucket, and he takes it, he's doing tile work, he dumps water out, you see him sweeping. There's another footage at the end where I just said to Detective John, would you agree he continues to do work? It's in evidence if you'd like to look at it. He has gloves on, he's literally carrying lumber from outside the house over the driveway and through. He's obviously doing work there. There is no dispute. But they don't like that fact, so they tell you, look at the state of disrepair. He wasn't doing a good job. He wasn't really doing work. Your own eyes will show you the work that he's doing with a camera that, thank God, they put up. On February 15th, this is the night that he goes over to Mr. Biggerstaff's house. They want you to believe that it had to be to pick up a 10 millimeter until when we went through all the evidence and we went through John Biggerstaff's phone, who somehow this morning, everything was wiped. There is no evidence. We could gain nothing from these people. No, they just didn't gain evidence that connects Mr. Fernandez to homicide. What they did gain is plenty of evidence. And in this evidence, there is a video of Mr. Fernandez. He's there that night, and he's doing whatever he's doing, and that's not the point. I'm not hiding it. If you recall, I'm the one who asked Detective Johns about it. But he's on video. You know exactly what he's doing there, and he's not picking up a 10 millimeter. And when I asked John Biggerstaff, did he owe you anything? Was he doing this because you were going to give him a gun? No, no, no. Detective Johns, did you have other evidence that Maria Biggerstaff was caught on video doing these things? Yes. This was the lifestyle that they chose to live. But when you actually know for an undisputed fact why Mr. Fernandez was there on the 15th, ignore that. It has to be because he picked up a 10 millimeter firearm that's not connected to this homicide. And we'll talk more about that. On the night of the homicide, Mr. Fernandez returns to his house at 5:45. He is there the entire night. There is no evidence that he left his home. Think about all of the different detectives that told you that they collected detailed evidence from the crime scene. People touched the little, the caps that are on the tire, we collected those. Not one person can connect you, Mr. Fernandez, to any piece of evidence that was left at the homicide scene, or most importantly, the blue truck. They used special vacuums, if you recall me asking the detective, with special filters so they could collect hair. They did fingerprint dusting. They did DNA testing of the steering wheel, the seats, the headrests. Not one piece of evidence connects Mr. Fernandez to ever being inside of that Ford F-150. And then I went one step further. I'm like, well, it's been a little while. Was there evidence that the vehicle was cleaned out, wiped, cleaned, vacuumed? No. It was side of a pigsty. No evidence that it was cleaned out. And yet they couldn't find one piece of evidence connecting Mr. Fernandez. And remember, when Mr. Fernandez goes in for his interview, it's voluntary. And they say, will you give us a DNA swab? And he says, no problem. And he gives his DNA. And according to the government, what they told you is he never thought he would ever get caught. So of course he would give a DNA swab. Well, if he was so willing to do that, knowing that he was inside of the blue truck, that doesn't make sense. And that's in conflict with what the government wants you to believe. Not a single eyewitness, not a single Crime Stopper, no DNA, no fingerprints, and he tells law enforcement he's home and he gives details about date night. Detective Johns, went on to say that they don't know where the F-150 went post-homicide, that an unknown driver pulled out of Pablo Hamlet, an unknown driver passes Ocean K, and they do not know where the truck went post the homicide. It's never to be seen again. If there's an unknown driver, okay, and unknown locations, 36-minute gaps, and then a vehicle that just disappears, if they don't know who the players in this case are, then they don't know what happened. And I mean the government doesn't know what happened. And when they say there's only one person that could connect Mr. Fernandez to these little details, it's impossible to say that when you don't know who the other person in the truck was. The other person in the truck could be connected to Shanna Gardner. The other person in the truck could be connected to Shanna Gardner's family. The other person in the truck could be connected directly to Jared Bridegan. And we would never know because we don't have their bank records. We don't have their DNA swab. We don't have their phone records. It's an unknown player that's not Mr. Fernandez. So when you go back there and you say, well, geez, I mean, out of all the gin joints in all the world, it's Mario Fernandez's, it's Henry Tenon is Mario Fernandez's tenant. So all this makes sense and we should just go along and make sure that we don't unstring the yarn or whatever it is that Ms. Stifler showed you at the end of the tapestry. The bottom line is, for the government to tell you that there's only one connection, they have to know who's involved, and they don't. Keep going. So the 10mm firearm. How many times have you heard the government tell you it's an unaccounted for 10mm firearm? Let me be very clear about this. The first thing they would have to do for this to have any evidentiary value is they have to tell you that John Biggerstaff's 10mm firearm is connected to the homicide of Jared Bridegan. They have not done that. There are tens of thousands of 10mm firearms in Glocks that have been produced since 1991, and they don't know which of any one of those it is that was involved in this homicide. So let's just start with that premise. Then the second thing the government would have to do is then connect Mr. Fernandez to John Biggerstaff's firearm. So what did we show you? We showed you that John Biggerstaff, in fact, did purchase a 10mm firearm in 2016. Then he became, he was arrested. So this is the purchase of the Glock. This is the Glock that was put on the firearms affidavit, which of course is a big deal that it matches, because it would be a big deal if the government could show that John Biggerstaff bought a 10mm, then filled out a firearms affidavit, and that firearm wasn't on it. That would be good evidence to suggest that he kept one of his guns. But that's not what the facts are. The facts are is that he bought one, he filled out a firearms affidavit, and the exact one that he bought was put on it. And the magistrate said you can no longer have guns, and he got rid of them. And I think Ms. Stifler said during her close, well, I mean, you know, just because a judge tells you to do it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Sure it does. He got rid of all of them, with Juan Biggerstaff, his son present, and someone from federal probation. And when you don't follow the rules, that's exactly what happens. You go to jail. And when he tested positive for drugs, because the government does a little thing called following up, they make sure you don't have your firearms when you're on federal pretrial release. You think they just take your word for it? No, they send someone to your home. They make you fill out an affidavit. They check to make sure you don't have them. They tell you you're not supposed to do drugs. When he tested positive for drugs, what did they do? They arrested him, and he went straight to jail. So this idea that they just don't follow up, or it's not a big deal, it's in conflict to their own evidence. So then he fills out the firearms affidavit, that firearm is put on there, and it's not seen again for all of these years. But they made such a big deal about it. How rare it was. How this could be the only 10mm that could be involved. They went to one pawn shop. Detective John sent his investigators to one pawn shop in all of Jacksonville, and they found 6 10mm that were sold in the recent time, 3 of which were Glock 40 Gen 4s, the exact make and model of John Biggerstaff's. Like, he laughed when he's like, you know anyone that owns a 10mm? He hasn't been allowed to be around guns or people that are in possession of guns since 2016. He probably doesn't know someone who has one. We don't have to guess that people own them. 6 of them were purchased in and around the time of the homicide in Jacksonville Beach, 3 of which match the exact description. And when I asked Detective Johns, well, once you learned that, what did you do? Nothing. You didn't follow up? No. You didn't go interview anyone? No. Nothing. Zero. When they learned that Henry Tenon had gone to a particular pawn shop and actually pawned something, did you go there and investigate to see if he got a 10 millimeter? No. Did you go to any other pawn shops anywhere across town ever? No. But they want, what's more reasonable? That maybe someone who actually got a firearm during that period of time may have been involved, or that Mario Fernandez, who not one witness, and we'll talk about John Biggerstaff, Juan Biggerstaff, and Fred Barton, not one of them said anything about Mario Fernandez, other than John Biggerstaff said, I did not give him a firearm. On March 1st, Mr. Fernandez came in and he gave a voluntary interview. You know, because of his bank accounts, that on March 1st, he had in excess of $200,000 available to him. Hiring a lawyer is not something that he could not have done. He didn't show up with counsel. He didn't invoke his right to remain silent. He sat down voluntarily. He gave an interview. And then I asked on cross-examination to figure out, well, let's see if the guy was telling the truth. He talked a lot. You heard the interview. Detective, he told you that Jared Bridegan got into a big confrontation with Bishop Curry about the purple hair. Did you ever go and interview Bishop Curry to see if that was true? We did. And in fact, there was a big confrontation, wasn't there? Well, I don't know if it was a confrontation, wouldn't answer my question, but yes, they got into it, and Bishop Curry was not happy about their interaction. That's what Detective Johns told you. But the point that I'm making is, he went, he interviewed him, and it did, in fact, happen. It was true. He wasn't lying. AB phone call, true. The children's therapist that he talked about, Mercedes McGowan, this is a guy who's some absentee stepdad. He knows who the children's therapist is. He knows all the medications they're on. Did you find out if that was true? That was the children's therapist? We did. He admitted that it was a high conflict co-parenting situation. He didn't deny that. If he's thinking I'm the suspect in this murder or I'm involved in this, maybe I should make it seem like things weren't that bad. No, he said it was a high conflict. That's exactly what the evidence showed. As Ms. Stifler said, most people said he admitted there was some high conflict, and that's exactly what he told the police. He didn't undersell it or try to underreport. He told it exactly like it was. And he was upset that Miss Gardner and the children were not invited to Jared Bridegan's funeral after inviting Kirsten Bridegan into their home. And all of that was true. They were not invited, and they did invite Kirsten Bridegan into their home. The government, of course, talks about the motive. We talked about the family law case as to why there's no motive, and they just keep focusing on this one sentence. But I ask you to please remember that what the evidence was is that they asked him questions about Jared Bridegan. So they keep saying, he just kept bad talking Jared Bridegan. They were only asking questions about Jared Bridegan, and that he would give the answers. And he was saying that the children needed to be in therapy, and therapy was good for the children. And if Jared Bridegan attempted to take the children out of therapy, which they believed Mercedes McGowan was helpful, that the family law lawyers suggested that then they would file for a social investigation, and then they would move to modify the time sharing to 60-40 or something that worked better for the children. That's what the interview that's in evidence says. Don't take my word for it. That's why I took the transcript out and I read it line by line with Detective Johns. It's not just that we want decision making. And most importantly, the children were never taken out of therapy, and they never moved ever to modify the time sharing agreement. So the predicate of what this was based on never happened, and then they never took this action. So to suggest that now they would just kill Jared Bridegan because that's an easier solution, there is no evidence they had any motive to take one single day away from Jared Bridegan unless he did something that would negatively impact the children which he decided not to do.
Mr. Dreicer, can I pause you for a break?
Yes.
Okay. Members of the jury will take 15 minutes, okay?